Welcome back to the Historian's Tome, where history's greatest mysteries unfold in gentle storytelling designed to carry you peacefully into sleep. Whether you're settling in from London, New York, Tokyo, or anywhere else in the world, you've found the perfect place to drift into the past. If this is your first time joining us, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Tonight, we're exploring one of maritime history's most enduring mysteries. A tale that has puzzled investigators for over 150 years. Close your eyes and let me transport you to the Atlantic Ocean in December 1872, where we'll encounter the ghost ship known as the Mary Celeste. This is the story of an abandoned vessel found drifting perfectly seaworthy, yet completely deserted, her cargo intact, her sails set, but her crew and passengers vanished without a trace into the vast expanse of the sea. The morning of December 4th, 1872, dawned clear and cold over the Atlantic Ocean, roughly halfway between Portugal and the Azores. Captain David Reed Morehouse stood on the deck of his merchant brigantine, the Gibraltar, scanning the horizon through his spyglass, as he had done countless times during his 27 years at sea. The wind was favorable, carrying his ship eastward toward Gibraltar with a cargo of petroleum, and the crew was in good spirits as they went about their morning duties. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Morehouse first spotted the distant sail. At first glance, it appeared to be just another merchant vessel navigating the busy Atlantic shipping lanes, but something about its movement caught his attention. The ship seemed to be sailing erratically, her course wandering aimlessly across the swells. Morehouse lowered his spyglass and called to his first mate, Oliver Devoe, a seasoned sailor whose sharp eyes and steady judgment had served them well on many voyages. Devoe joined his captain at the rail and studied the distant vessel. Even from several miles away, they could see that something was amiss. The ship's sails were partially set in an unusual configuration, some furled, others catching the wind haphazardly. Her movement across the water lacked the purposeful direction of a vessel under proper command. Most tellingly, there was no sign of life on her decks. As the day Gibraltar drew closer, Morehouse felt a growing sense of unease. He had sailed these waters many times, and ships in distress were not uncommon. Pirates, storms, disease, and mechanical failures could all leave a vessel in dire straits. But this ship appeared to be in remarkably good condition. Her hull rode high in the water, suggesting she was not taking on significant amounts of water. Her rigging, while disheveled, showed no signs of catastrophic damage. Through his spyglass, Morehouse could make out the name painted on the vessel's stern, Mary Celeste. The name struck him immediately, for he knew this ship well. She was captained by Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a man Morehouse had known for years and considered both a friend and a fellow professional of the highest caliber. Briggs was an experienced master mariner from a respected Massachusetts seafaring family. Not the type of man to abandon his ship lightly. The Mary Celeste had departed New York Harbor just over a month earlier, on November 7th, bound for Genoa, Italy, with a cargo of denatured alcohol. Morehouse remembered seeing her in the harbor, her crew making final preparations for the Atlantic crossing. Captain Briggs had been aboard with his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, planning to combine business with a family voyage. It was not unusual for sea captains to bring their families on longer voyages, and Sarah Briggs was an experienced traveler who had accompanied her husband on previous journeys. Now, as the Gibraltar approached within hailing distance, Morehouse called out across the water. His voice carried clearly in the still air, but no response came from the Mary Celeste. He called again, louder this time, his crew joining their voices to his. The only sound that returned was the whisper of wind through rigging and the gentle slap of waves against both hulls. Devoe suggested firing a signal cannon to attract attention, thinking perhaps the crew was below decks and had not heard their calls. The cannon's boom echoed across the water, but still no figures appeared on the Mary Celeste's deck. No answering signal came from her rigging. The ship continued her aimless drift, seemingly oblivious to the presence of another vessel, Captain Morehouse made the decision that would thrust him into one of maritime history's greatest mysteries. He ordered his crew to heave to and prepare a boarding party. First Mate DeVoe volunteered to lead the investigation, accompanied by Second Mate John Wright and Sailor Charles Lund. The three men lowered a boat and rowed across the narrow stretch of water separating the two vessels. As they approached the Mary Celeste's hull, they could see that she was riding about 3.5 feet lower in the water than she should have been, indicating some water in her hold, but nothing approaching a dangerous level. Her paint was weathered but intact, and her copper sheathing showed the normal wear of a month at sea. There were no obvious signs of violence, fire, or collision damage. DeVoe was the first to climb aboard, hauling himself up the ship's side and over the rail onto her main deck. The silence that greeted him was profound and unsettling. In his years at sea, he had boarded many vessels, and there was always some sound of human presence, the creak of footsteps, the murmur of voices, the clatter of tools or cookware. Here there was nothing but the whisper of wind and the gentle groan of timber. The deck showed signs of normal wear and weather, but no evidence of struggle or violence. Coils of rope lay neatly arranged, and the ship's boats were secure in their davits. However, DeVoe noted immediately that the ship's peak halyard was broken and hanging loose, and several sails were in unusual configurations. The foresail and upper foretopsail had been blown away entirely, while the lower foretopsail hung by its four corners. The mainsail had been furled and secured to the boom, but other sails remained partially set. Wright and Lund joined DeVoe on deck, and together they began a systematic search of the vessel. They started with the forecastle, where the crew would have slept. The sailors' quarters were neat and orderly, with personal belongings still in their proper places. Sea chests contained clothes and personal effects, but there was no sign of hasty packing or abandonment. It was as if the crew had simply vanished mid-voyage. Moving aft, they examined the ship's galley. Here they found evidence of recent meal preparation. The galley was clean and organized, with cooking utensils properly stowed. There was no indication of a meal interrupted or abandoned in haste. The ship's stores were well stocked, with provisions for the long journey to Genoa, including barrels of fresh water, salt pork, and hardtack biscuit in the captain's cabin. They discovered Captain Briggs's personal effects, including his clothes, books, and navigational instruments. His wife's belongings were similarly undisturbed, as were those of their young daughter. A small toy piano that had belonged to Sophia sat silent in the corner, a poignant reminder of the family that had vanished. The ship's log provided crucial information about the Mary Celeste's final known position and circumstances. The last entry, dated November 25th, 9 days before the Dei Gracia's discovery, showed that the ship had been near the island of Santa Maria in the Azores. This meant she had been sailing unmanned for over a week, drifting roughly 400 miles in that time. Perhaps most mysteriously, the ship's cargo remained intact and valuable. The 1701 barrels of denatured alcohol in her hold were properly secured and showed no signs of tampering. This cargo alone was worth a considerable sum, making piracy seem an unlikely explanation for the crew's disappearance. As DeVoe and his men completed their search, they found no evidence of violence, no signs of struggle, and no indication of why 10 people would abandon a seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean. The Mary Celeste's compass was destroyed, and her sextant and chronometer were missing, suggesting that whoever left the ship had taken navigational instruments with them. Most significantly, the ship's boat was gone, apparently launched from her davits. Standing on the deck of the abandoned vessel as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western horizon, DeVoe felt the weight of the mystery settling around him. Here was a ship in remarkable condition, her cargo intact, her provisions adequate, sailing under jury rig across empty ocean without a soul aboard. Whatever had happened to Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew had occurred suddenly enough that they left behind all their personal possessions, yet deliberately enough that they had time to launch the ship's boat and take navigational instruments. The discovery of the Mary Celeste would launch one of history's most enduring maritime mysteries, spawning countless theories and investigations that continue to this day. But on that December afternoon in 1872, Devoe and his companions could only wonder at the silence that surrounded them and prepare to sail the ghost ship toward Gibraltar, where the mystery would deepen rather than resolve. To understand the mystery of the Mary Celeste, we must first come to know the vessel herself and the people who sailed aboard her on that fateful November voyage. She was not a grand ship by the standards of her day, but she was solid, reliable, and well-suited to the transatlantic cargo trade that formed the backbone of 19th century commerce. The Mary Celeste had been born under a different name in the shipyards of Nova Scotia in 1861. Originally christened Amazon, she was a brigantine of 282 tons, measuring 103 feet in length with a beam of 25 feet and a depth of 16 feet. Her construction was typical of Canadian-built merchant vessels of the period, with a solid oak frame and pine, planking that could withstand the harsh conditions of North Atlantic crossings. The Amazon's early years had been marked by misfortune that some would later claim cursed the vessel. Her first captain, Robert McClellan, died of pneumonia just 2 days after taking command. The ship then suffered a collision in the English Channel that required extensive repairs. She changed hands several times, each ownership bringing new challenges and setbacks, until she ran aground on Cape Breton Island and was declared a total loss by her insurers. But the Amazon was destined for resurrection. In 1868, she was salvaged and sold to American interests, who brought her to New York for extensive refitting. It was during this renovation that she received her new name, Mary Celeste, though the reason for the change remains unclear. Some records suggest it was simply a clerical error, while others propose it was an intentional rebranding to distance the vessel from her troubled past. The ship that emerged from the New York shipyards was transformed. Her interior had been reconfigured for both cargo and passenger accommodation, with comfortable quarters for a captain's family and improved crew facilities. Her rigging was updated and her hull strengthened, making her well-suited for the demanding Atlantic cargo routes. By 1872, she was considered a reliable and profitable vessel, popular among shippers for her steady performance and reasonable rates. The man chosen to command the Mary Celeste on her final voyage was Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a mariner whose reputation for competence and reliability was matched by few in the merchant marine. Born in 1835 on Cape Cod, Briggs came from a family steeped in maritime tradition. His father, Nathan Briggs, had been a sea captain before him, and the family had been involved in shipping and seafaring for generations. Benjamin Briggs had first gone to sea as a young man and had steadily worked his way up through the ranks of the merchant marine. By his mid-30s, he was recognized as one of the most capable masters sailing out of New York. He was known for his meticulous attention to detail, his fair treatment of crews, and his conservative approach to navigation that prioritized safety over speed. These qualities had earned him the respect of ship owners, crew members, and fellow captains alike. Briggs was also a deeply religious man, a member of the Christian Connection Church who neither drank alcohol nor allowed it aboard his vessels. This temperance was unusual in an era when daily rum rations were standard for merchant crews, but Briggs maintained strict discipline without resorting to harsh measures. His ships were known for their orderly operation and low rates of desertion, testament to his skill as both navigator and leader. In 1862, Benjamin Briggs had married Sarah Elizabeth Cobb, a woman from a respected Massachusetts family with her own connections to the maritime community. Sarah was an educated, strong-willed woman who shared her husband's religious convictions and sense of adventure. She had accompanied him on several previous voyages and was considered an experienced sea traveler. Comfortable with the rhythms and challenges of life aboard a merchant vessel, the couple had been blessed with 3 children. Their son Arthur, born in 1865, had been left in the care of Sarah's mother for the Mary Celeste voyage, as the Atlantic crossing in late autumn was considered too dangerous for a 7-year-old. However, their daughter Sophia Matilda, born in 1870, would accompany her parents to Italy. At just 2 years old, Sophia was described by those who knew the family as a bright, cheerful child who delighted in the adventure of sea travel. The crew assembled for the Mary Celeste's final voyage represented a cross-section of the international maritime community. First Mate Albert Richardson was a German-born sailor with extensive experience in transatlantic commerce. At 28 years of age, he was considered competent and reliable, the type of officer upon whom a captain could depend during the challenges of an ocean crossing. Second Mate Andrew Gilling hailed from Denmark and had sailed with Captain Briggs on previous voyages. His familiarity with Briggs' methods and expectations made him a valuable member of the ship's complement. The remaining crew consisted of 4 able seamen, 2 Germans named Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, who were brothers, Arjen Martens, also German, and Gottlieb Gaudschal, who was Dutch. This crew composition was typical of American merchant vessels of the period, which often relied on experienced European sailors willing to work for reasonable wages on transatlantic routes. The men were all experienced mariners with clean records and good references. None had any known history of violence, mutiny, or other troubles that might suggest they posed a threat to the ship or her passengers. The cargo that filled the Mary Celeste's hold on that November departure was 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, consigned to H. Masangni and Cuppers of Genoa. Denatured alcohol was a common industrial product used in manufacturing, and as a solvent, created by adding methanol and other substances to grain alcohol to make it unfit for human consumption. This process allowed it to be shipped and sold without the heavy taxes imposed on potable alcohol. The shipment was valuable, but not extraordinarily so, worth approximately $37,000, a substantial sum in 1872, but not enough to inspire the elaborate piracy schemes that some would later propose. The alcohol was shipped in standard oak barrels, properly secured in the hold according to maritime regulations for hazardous cargo. Captain Briggs had been meticulous in his preparations for the voyage. The Mary Celeste had been thoroughly inspected and provisioned for the Atlantic crossing, with supplies sufficient for several months at sea should weather or other delays extend the journey. Her navigation equipment was current and in excellent condition, including a recently calibrated chronometer essential for determining longitude at sea. The ship's manifest showed a complement of 10 souls: Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their daughter Sophia, and the 7 crew members. This was a typical number for a vessel of the Mary Celeste's size and purpose, sufficient to handle the ship in normal weather while small enough to maximize cargo space and minimize wage costs. On the morning of November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste cleared New York Harbor under ideal conditions. The weather was fair, the wind favorable, and Captain Briggs was in excellent spirits as he set course for the Strait of Gibraltar and the Mediterranean beyond. Fellow mariners who observed the ship's departure later testified that she appeared in perfect order, her crew efficient and her passengers comfortable. The ship that sailed out of New York that November morning carried with her the hopes and plans of 10 people embarking on what should have been a routine commercial voyage. Captain Briggs looked forward to conducting business in Genoa and showing his wife and daughter the historic Mediterranean port. The crew anticipated steady wages and the adventure of foreign travel. None could have imagined that within 3 weeks, their ship would be found drifting empty across the Atlantic. Her cargo intact, but her people vanished as completely, as if the sea had swallowed them whole. The Mary Celeste herself would survive to tell part of the story through the evidence left behind in her silent cabins and empty decks. But the fate of Benjamin Briggs, his family, and his crew would remain one of the sea's most enduring secrets. a mystery that would outlive the ship herself and continue to puzzle investigators more than a century later. The salvage of the Mary Celeste presented Captain Morehouse with both an opportunity and a dilemma. Under maritime law, the crew of the Gibraltar was entitled to substantial salvage rights for bringing the abandoned vessel safely to port. However, the mysterious circumstances of the ship's condition would soon embroil them in a legal investigation that questioned their motives and integrity. After completing their initial search of the Mary Celeste, DeVoe and his men prepared the vessel for sailing. Despite her abandoned state, the ship proved to be remarkably seaworthy. The water in her hold was troublesome, but not dangerous, easily managed with the ship's pumps. Her rigging required some attention where sails had been damaged or improperly set, but her hull and basic systems were sound. Captain Morehouse made the decision to split his crew between the two vessels. DeVoe would take command of the Mary Celeste with 2 men from the Gibraltar, while Morehouse continued toward Gibraltar with a reduced crew aboard his own ship. This arrangement would allow both vessels to reach port safely while preserving the evidence aboard the Mary Celeste for official inspection. The voyage to Gibraltar took 3 days, during which DeVoe and his small crew had ample opportunity to study the abandoned ship more thoroughly. The more they learned, the deeper the mystery became. Everything about the Mary Celeste suggested a crew that had abandoned ship suddenly, but not in panic. Personal belongings remained neatly arranged. The cargo was properly secured, and there were no signs of violence or struggle. Most puzzling was the condition of the captain's cabin. Captain Briggs' sword remained in its scabbard, hanging in its usual place. His papers and logbooks were orderly and complete up to the final entry on November 25th. Sarah Briggs's sewing basket sat undisturbed, with a half-finished piece of needlework still attached to her needle. These details suggested that whatever had prompted the abandonment had occurred suddenly and without warning. The ship's galley provided additional clues that would later prove significant. The stove was knocked out of place and lying on its side, as if dislodged by heavy seas or sudden movement. However, there was no corresponding damage to other fixtures that would be expected if the ship had encountered severe weather. The galley's displacement seemed isolated and deliberate, though its significance remained unclear. When the 2 vessels reached Gibraltar on December 13, 1872, they immediately attracted official attention. The port authorities were accustomed to ships arriving with tales of adventure and mishap, but the Mary Celeste presented an unprecedented mystery. Captain Morehouse reported the discovery to the British authorities, who held jurisdiction over the strategic port at the entrance to the Mediterranean. The case was assigned to Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General for Gibraltar and the Queen's Proctor in Admiralty cases. Flood was an experienced legal mind with a reputation for thoroughness and an instinctive suspicion of maritime insurance fraud. From the moment he first boarded the Mary Celeste, Flood suspected that Captain Morehouse and his crew were not telling the complete truth about their discovery. Flood's suspicions were initially based on the relationship between Morehouse and Captain Briggs. The 2 men had known each other for years and had dined together in New York shortly before their respective departures. This connection, combined with the substantial salvage claim the Gibraltar crew stood to receive, led Flood to consider the possibility of insurance fraud or even murder. The Attorney General ordered a thorough examination of both vessels. Expert marine surveyors inspected the Mary Celeste's hull, rigging and cargo, searching for evidence of foul play or deliberate damage. Naval architects studied her construction and seaworthiness, while experienced mariners evaluated the condition of her sails and equipment. The survey results were puzzling rather than conclusive. The Mary Celeste was found to be fundamentally sound, capable of weathering normal Atlantic conditions without difficulty. The water in her hold appeared to have entered through normal seepage and minor leaks, rather than catastrophic damage. Her cargo of alcohol showed no signs of tampering, with the barrels properly secured and their contents at expected levels. However, several mysterious details emerged during the investigation. The ship's compass was found destroyed, apparently deliberately broken rather than damaged by weather or accident. The sextant and marine chronometer were missing from the navigation equipment, suggesting they had been deliberately removed. Most significantly, marks on the ship's rail appeared to have been made by an axe or similar tool. Though their purpose remained unclear, these axe marks would become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the Mary Celeste mystery. Some investigators interpreted them as signs of violence, possibly indicating that the crew had been attacked. Others suggested they might have been made during attempts to free rigging or equipment during an emergency. The marks were real and clearly visible, but their significance remained open to interpretation. Attorney General Flood focused particularly on the missing ship's boat. The Mary Celeste had carried a yawl boat in davits along her port side, and this boat was clearly gone when the vessel was discovered. The davits showed signs that the boat had been launched properly rather than torn away by weather, suggesting a deliberate decision to abandon ship. However, no trace of the boat or its occupants was ever found, despite extensive searches of the surrounding sea areas. The legal proceedings began with testimony from Captain Morehouse and his crew. Their account of the discovery was consistent and detailed, matching the physical evidence found aboard the Mary Celeste. However, Flood pressed them aggressively on their relationship with Captain Briggs and their potential motives for participating in insurance fraud. Morehouse. His testimony revealed the full extent of his acquaintance with Briggs. The two captains had known each other for several years through their work in the merchant marine. They had shared meals and professional conversations, but Morehouse insisted their relationship was purely professional. He denied any prior arrangement or conspiracy involving the Mary Celeste's cargo or insurance. First, Mate DeVoe provided crucial testimony about the condition of the ship when first boarded. His detailed description of the vessel's state became the foundation for all subsequent theories about what had happened to her crew. DeVoe's account was thorough and consistent, describing everything from the position of personal belongings to the configuration of sails and rigging. The investigation expanded to include interviews with people who had seen the Mary Celeste before her departure from New York. Port officials, dock workers, and other mariners provided testimony about the ship's condition and the behavior of her crew during the final days before sailing. All accounts described a normal departure with no indication of problems or unusual circumstances. Captain Winchester, one of the Mary Celeste's owners, traveled to Gibraltar to participate in the investigation and protect his interests in the vessel. His testimony provided important background about the ship's history, her recent repairs and modifications, and the circumstances surrounding Captain Briggs's appointment to command her. Winchester's account supported the theory that the voyage had been planned and executed normally, with no indication of problems or conspiracy. Despite weeks of investigation and testimony, Flood was unable to develop evidence supporting his suspicions of fraud or foul play. The physical evidence aboard the Mary Celeste was consistent with sudden abandonment, but provided no clear indication of why such a decision had been made. The missing navigational instruments suggested deliberate preparation for leaving the ship. But the reason for such preparation remained mysterious. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, during which the Mary Celeste remained impounded in Gibraltar Harbor. The delay was costly for all parties involved, as the ship could not be used for commerce, and her cargo could not be delivered to its intended recipients in Genoa. The uncertainty also prevented resolution of the salvage claim, leaving the crew of the Dei Gratia without compensation for their efforts. Eventually, Attorney General Flood was forced to acknowledge that his investigation had failed to uncover evidence of criminal activity. While he remained personally suspicious of the circumstances surrounding the Mary Celeste's discovery, he could not build a legal case against Captain Morehouse or his crew. The salvage claim was allowed to proceed, though at a much reduced rate that reflected Flood's continued doubts about the case. The investigation's conclusion satisfied no one completely. Captain Morehouse and his crew received compensation for their salvage efforts, but far less than they had expected, and at great cost in time and reputation. The owners of the Mary Celeste recovered their vessel, but her mysterious abandonment had damaged her commercial value and raised questions about her insurability. Most importantly, the investigation had failed to answer the fundamental question of what had happened to Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew. The official record of the Gibraltar investigation would become the foundation for all subsequent theories about the Mary Celeste mystery. However, the investigation's failure to reach definitive conclusions ensured that the case would continue to puzzle researchers and capture public imagination for generations to come. The mystery that had begun with DeVoe's first steps onto the abandoned ship's deck had deepened rather than resolved, leaving more questions than answers about one of maritime history's most enduring puzzles. In the century and a half since the Mary Celeste was found drifting empty across the Atlantic, countless theories have been proposed to explain the mysterious fate of her crew and passengers. These explanations range from the scientifically plausible to the wildly speculative, each attempting to solve a puzzle that has defied definitive resolution despite extensive investigation and analysis. The most widely accepted theory among maritime experts centers on the potential danger posed by the ship's cargo of denatured alcohol. This explanation suggests that Captain Briggs may have ordered the temporary abandonment of his vessel due to fears of explosion or fire related to the alcohol fumes. Building up in the ship's hold, denatured alcohol, while chemically stable under normal conditions, can produce dangerous vapors when subjected to changes in temperature and pressure. The Mary Celeste's cargo consisted of 701 barrels of this industrial alcohol, stored in the ship's hold according to standard maritime practices of the era. However, these practices did not account for the subtle but potentially deadly accumulation of vapors that could occur during an ocean voyage. During the Mary Celeste's Atlantic crossing, she would have encountered varying weather conditions that could have caused expansion and contraction of the alcohol cargo. Temperature changes, rough seas and normal ship movement could have loosened barrel bungs or opened small leaks that would release vapors into the confined space of the hold. These vapors, being heavier than air, would settle in the lowest parts of the ship and gradually accumulate. Captain Briggs, being an experienced mariner and a cautious man, would have been aware of the potential dangers associated with his cargo. If he had detected strong alcohol fumes or other signs of vapor accumulation, he might have made the decision to temporarily abandon ship until the danger passed. This would explain why the ship's boat was missing and why navigational instruments had been taken, essential tools for finding the Mary Celeste again after the presumed danger had dissipated. The theory suggests that Briggs ordered all hands into the ship's boat, intending to maintain a safe distance from the vessel while the dangerous vapors dispersed. However, something went wrong with this plan. The boat may have been overwhelmed by rough seas, or the line connecting it to the Mary Celeste may have parted, leaving the boat's occupants stranded in the open ocean while their ship drifted, away beyond their ability to reach her. This alcohol vapor theory is supported by several pieces of physical evidence found aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship's galley stove had been knocked out of place, which could have been the result of hasty preparations for abandonment or concerns about potential ignition sources. The broken compass might have been damaged during hurried evacuation procedures. The overall condition of the ship, with some sails furled and others set, could reflect emergency preparations for temporary abandonment. However, the alcohol theory faces significant challenges. When the Mary Celeste's cargo was examined in Gibraltar, only 9 barrels were found to be empty, and these showed no clear signs of leakage that would have created dangerous vapor accumulation. Modern chemical analysis suggests that denatured alcohol of the type carried by the Mary Celeste would have been unlikely to produce explosive concentrations of vapor under normal shipping conditions. Another theory that has gained credence among some investigators involves the possibility of seaquake or seismic activity affecting the Mary Celeste during her voyage. The ocean floor in the area where she was found is geologically active, with underwater volcanic activity and seismic events that could have created unusual conditions. A significant underwater earthquake or volcanic eruption could have produced massive water displacement, creating rogue waves or unusual sea conditions that might have convinced Captain Briggs his ship was in imminent danger of sinking. The sudden appearance of such conditions, combined with possible damage to the ship's compass or other navigational equipment, could have prompted hasty abandonment. The seaquake theory would explain several puzzling aspects of the Mary Celeste mystery. It could account for the ship's relatively undamaged condition despite being abandoned, as seismic events often create dramatic but short-lived phenomena. It might explain why experienced mariners like Captain Briggs would make the seemingly irrational decision to abandon a seaworthy vessel. It could also explain the failure to recover the ship's boat and its occupants, as seaquake-generated waves could easily overwhelm a small boat. Weather-related theories focus on the possibility that the Mary Celeste encountered an unusual atmospheric phenomenon that created the appearance of imminent danger without actually damaging the ship. Waterspouts, sudden violent squalls, or other meteorological events could have created conditions that prompted temporary abandonment. Some researchers have proposed that the Mary Celeste may have encountered a waterspout or series of waterspouts during her voyage. These spinning columns of water and air can appear suddenly and create extremely dangerous conditions for sailing vessels. While waterspouts typically cause visible damage, it's possible that the Mary Celeste's encounter was brief enough to avoid major structural harm, while still frightening her crew into abandoning ship. The possibility of piracy, while initially considered by investigators, has largely been discounted by modern researchers. The Mary Celeste's valuable cargo remained untouched, and there were no signs of violence or struggle aboard the vessel. Pirates of the 1870s were generally motivated by profit and would not have left behind such valuable goods. Additionally, the careful launching of the ship's boat suggested deliberate action by the crew rather than external coercion. Insurance fraud theories, while investigated extensively by Attorney General Flood in Gibraltar, have never been substantiated with concrete evidence. While Captain Morehouse's prior acquaintance with Captain Briggs raised initial suspicions, subsequent investigation revealed no financial motives or arrangements that would have justified such an elaborate scheme. The reduced salvage award actually cost Morehouse and his crew money compared to completing their original voyage. More exotic theories have emerged over the years, often inspired by the mysterious circumstances of the Mary Celeste's discovery. Some have proposed alien abduction, though such explanations rely on phenomena not scientifically documented in the 19th century. Others have suggested encounters with sea monsters or other cryptozoological explanations. Though these lack any supporting physical evidence, the mutiny theory proposes that the Mary Celeste's crew rose against Captain Briggs and his family, then fled in the ship's boat after murdering them and disposing of the bodies at sea. However, this theory faces significant problems. The crew had sailed with Briggs previously and had good reputations. There were no signs of violence aboard the ship, and mutineers would likely have taken valuable cargo or personal belongings. The careful launching of the ship's boat also suggests cooperative rather than hostile action. Some investigators have proposed that the Mary Celeste encountered another vessel in distress, and that Captain Briggs made the heroic decision to transfer his entire complement to the other ship to assist in rescue operations. This theory suggests that both vessels were subsequently lost in bad weather, explaining why no trace was ever found of the Mary Celeste's people or boat. Modern forensic analysis has introduced new possibilities for explaining the Mary Celeste mystery. Computer modeling of ocean currents and weather patterns during November and December 1872 has provided insights into how the ship might have drifted and where her boat might have ended up. However, these studies have not identified any definitive evidence that would solve the case conclusively. The human factor cannot be overlooked in evaluating the Mary Celeste mystery. Captain Briggs was traveling with his wife and young daughter, adding emotional complexity to any decision-making process during a crisis. The presence of Sarah and Sophia Briggs might have influenced the captain's choices in ways that would not have affected a crew-only voyage. Psychological theories suggest that the isolation and stress of ocean travel, combined with concerns about cargo safety and family welfare, might have led to decision-making that appears irrational in retrospect, but seemed reasonable under the circumstances. The responsibility of protecting his family while managing a potentially dangerous cargo situation could have led Captain Briggs to choose excessive caution over calculated risk. Despite more than 150 years of investigation, speculation and analysis, no single theory has emerged that satisfactorily explains all aspects of the Mary Celeste mystery. The alcohol vapor theory remains the most scientifically credible explanation, but it cannot account for all the physical evidence and circumstances of the case. The seaquake theory offers intriguing possibilities, but lacks definitive geological evidence from the time and location in question. What remains clear is that 10 people made a decision to leave a seaworthy vessel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, taking with them only navigational instruments and the ship's boat. Whatever prompted this decision was significant enough to override the fundamental maritime principle that the ship is generally the safest place for those aboard her. The Mary Celeste mystery endures not because of lack of theories, but because the available evidence supports multiple explanations while conclusively proving none. The ghost ship continues to drift through history, her empty decks and silent cabins preserving a moment of human decision that changed the course of maritime legend. In the gentle rocking of waves against her hull and the whisper of wind through her rigging, the Mary Celeste keeps her secrets, a testament to the enduring power of mystery in an age that believes it has explained everything. The Mary Celeste story did not end with her discovery drifting empty across the Atlantic. In many ways, her rescue by the Dei Gratia marked only the beginning of a legend that would grow far beyond the simple facts of her mysterious abandonment. The ship herself would continue sailing for another 13 years, carrying cargo across the world's oceans while bearing the weight of her inexplicable history. Following the lengthy investigation in Gibraltar, the Mary Celeste was released to her owners and returned to commercial service. However, the vessel's reputation had been forever altered by the mystery of her abandonment. Sailors are notoriously superstitious, and word of the ghost ship spread quickly through the maritime community. Many experienced seamen refused to serve aboard her, believing the vessel to be cursed or haunted by the spirits of those who had vanished from her decks. This superstitious dread created practical difficulties for the Mary Celeste's owners. Finding reliable crews became increasingly challenging, and insurance rates reflected the perceived risk associated with the vessel's mysterious history. Captain Winchester and his partners found themselves operating a ship that, while perfectly seaworthy, carried an intangible burden that affected her commercial viability. Despite these challenges, the Mary Celeste continued working the Atlantic trade routes under a succession of captains. Each voyage was completed without incident, the ship proving herself as reliable and capable as any merchant vessel of her era. Yet the shadow of November 1872 followed her wherever she sailed, a reminder of the 10 souls who had vanished without explanation into the vast expanse of the sea. The ship's subsequent history was marked by a series of owners and captains, each hoping to profit from her solid construction while battling her dark reputation. She carried varied cargoes to ports throughout the Atlantic world, from timber and grain to manufactured goods and raw materials. Her performance remained exemplary, but the mystery of her abandonment continued to affect her commercial prospects. In 1885, 13 years after her discovery as a derelict, the Mary Celeste met her final fate in circumstances that some would claim completed the curse that had followed her since that mysterious November day. Her last captain, Gilman Parker, deliberately ran her aground on a coral reef off Haiti in what appeared to be an insurance fraud scheme. Parker had loaded the ship with a cargo of worthless goods, but insured them at inflated values, planning to collect on the insurance after the ship's destruction. The scheme failed spectacularly. Investigators quickly discovered the fraudulent nature of Parker's cargo and the deliberate nature of the wreck. Parker and his co-conspirators were arrested and charged with barratry, the maritime crime of deliberately destroying a vessel for insurance money. The trial that followed was a sensation in maritime circles, with newspapers drawing connections between the Mary Celeste's mysterious past and her ignominious end. Captain Parker died before his trial could be completed, his death attributed by some to the curse that allegedly followed the Mary Celeste throughout her career. His co-conspirators faced financial ruin and professional disgrace, their attempted fraud having destroyed not only the historic vessel but their own futures as well. The Mary Celeste herself was left to break apart on the Haitian reef, her timbers scattered by Caribbean storms until nothing remained of the ship that had become maritime history's greatest mystery. The destruction of the Mary Celeste marked the end of her physical existence, but her legend was only beginning to grow. The story of the abandoned ship and her missing crew captured public imagination in a way that few maritime mysteries had before. Newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic published accounts of the discovery, each adding new details and speculation to an already compelling narrative. The mystery proved particularly attractive to authors and storytellers seeking dramatic material for their work. In 1884, a young British writer named Arthur Conan Doyle published a short story titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement in Cornhill magazine. Doyle's fictional account, which claimed to be the true story of the Mary Celeste's fate as told by a survivor, introduced elements that would become permanently associated with the case despite having no basis in historical fact. Doyle's story, written before he achieved fame as the creator of Sherlock Holmes, took considerable liberties with the known facts of the case. He changed the ship's name to Marie Celeste, added fictional passengers and crew members, and created a dramatic narrative involving political intrigue and racial conflict. Most significantly, Doyle described the ship as being found with breakfast still warm on the table and personal belongings scattered about. Details that captured readers' imaginations despite being complete fabrications. The influence of Doyle's fictional account cannot be overstated. Many of the facts that people believe about the Mary Celeste mystery actually originated in his story, rather than in historical records. The image of a ship found with meals half-eaten and signs of sudden, panicked abandonment comes from Doyle's imagination, not from the testimony of those who actually boarded the vessel in December 1872. This blending of fact and fiction became characteristic of the Mary Celeste legend as it developed over the subsequent decades. Each retelling of the story seemed to add new dramatic elements, often presented as newly discovered facts. The mystery became a blank canvas onto which writers and storytellers could project their own interpretations and embellishments. The early 20th century saw increased interest in the Mary Celeste case as maritime historians began systematic studies of the available evidence. Researchers attempted to separate fact from fiction, examining contemporary records and witness testimonies to establish what had actually happened versus what had been added by later storytellers. This scholarly approach brought new rigor to the investigation, but also highlighted how much misinformation had become associated with the case. World War I and its aftermath brought renewed attention to maritime mysteries as the public became fascinated with stories of ships lost at sea. The Mary Celeste joined other famous maritime legends like the Flying Dutchman and the Titanic as symbols of the sea's power to claim human life without explanation. Her story was retold in countless books, articles, and eventually radio programs and films. The development of modern communication technology allowed the Mary Celeste story to spread globally in ways that would have been impossible in 1872. Radio broadcasts carried dramatic retellings to audiences around the world, while newspapers syndicated feature articles about the mystery to readers in dozens of countries. The ship that had sailed in relative obscurity during her working life became one of history's most famous vessels through the mystery of her abandonment. Hollywood's golden age brought the Mary Celeste to the silver screen, though filmmakers took even greater liberties with historical accuracy than earlier writers had. Movies portrayed the ship as a floating charnel house, complete with ghostly apparitions and supernatural phenomena that bore no resemblance to the actual circumstances of her discovery. These dramatic portrayals further embedded fictional elements into public understanding of the case. The advent of television continued this trend, with documentary programs and dramatic series featuring the Mary Celeste mystery. Each new medium seemed to add its own interpretations and embellishments to the story, often presenting speculation as established fact. The challenge for serious researchers became not just solving the original mystery, but correcting the accumulated misinformation that had grown around it. Modern forensic science and historical research methods have brought new tools to bear on the Mary Celeste mystery. Computer modeling, chemical analysis, and advanced maritime archaeology have provided insights that were unavailable to earlier investigators. However, these scientific approaches have also highlighted the limitations of the available evidence and the challenges inherent in solving a 150-year-old cold case. The Mary Celeste has become more than just a historical mystery. She has evolved into a cultural phenomenon that reflects humanity's fascination with the unexplained. Her story touches on fundamental questions about fate, decision-making, and the limits of human knowledge. In an age when technology seems capable of explaining everything, the Mary Celeste stands as a reminder that some mysteries may never be fully solved. The ship's legacy extends beyond entertainment and historical curiosity. Maritime safety regulations, navigation procedures, and emergency protocols have all been influenced by lessons learned from analyzing the Mary Celeste case. Her story serves as a case study in crisis decision-making and the importance of maintaining detailed records. During ocean voyages, educational institutions use the Mary Celeste mystery to teach critical thinking and research methodology. Students learn to distinguish between primary sources and later embellishments, to evaluate evidence objectively, and to understand how legends develop over time. The case has become a valuable tool for demonstrating the importance of rigorous historical analysis. The Mary Celeste continues to inspire new generations of researchers, writers, and maritime enthusiasts. Modern technology offers tools for investigation that were unimaginable to earlier researchers, yet the fundamental mystery remains unsolved. Each new analysis brings hope that definitive answers might finally be found, while often revealing new questions that previous investigators had not considered. In the quiet moments between waves and wind, when the ocean lies calm under starlit skies, mariners still speak of the Mary Celeste. Her story has become part of maritime folklore, passed down through generations of sailors who understand the sea's power to create mysteries that outlast the ships and men who experience them. The ghost ship sails on through legend and memory, carrying her secrets into an uncertain future where truth and mystery continue their eternal dance. As our journey through the mystery of the Mary Celeste draws to its close, we find ourselves in the same position as countless investigators before us, standing on the deck of an abandoned ship with more questions than answers. The gentle lapping of waves against her hull seems to whisper secrets that remain just beyond our understanding, while the wind through her rigging carries echoes of voices that fell silent more than a century and a half ago. The enduring fascination with the Mary Celeste speaks to something fundamental in human nature. Our deep need to understand the inexplicable and to find meaning in the face of mystery. In a world increasingly dominated by scientific explanation and technological solution, the story of 10 people who vanished from a seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean reminds us that some questions may never find complete answers. Perhaps this is as it should be. The Mary Celeste mystery has given us something more valuable than a simple solution might have provided. It has given us a story that has inspired countless hours of investigation, speculation, and wonder. It has challenged researchers to develop new methods of historical analysis and forensic investigation. It has reminded us that the sea, for all our modern understanding of oceanography and navigation, remains a place where the unexpected can still occur. In the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, as you listen to this tale of maritime mystery, consider the courage it must have taken for Captain Benjamin Briggs to make whatever decision led to the abandonment of his ship. Whether facing fears of explosion, responding to what seemed like imminent natural disaster, or making a choice we can no longer comprehend, he was responsible not just for his crew, but for his beloved wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Imagine Sarah Briggs in those final moments aboard the Mary Celeste, gathering whatever few possessions she could carry while preparing to entrust her family's lives to a small boat on the vast Atlantic. Picture little Sophia, perhaps frightened by the sudden activity, but trusting in her parents' protection as she was lifted into the ship's boat. These were real people facing a real crisis, making decisions based on information and circumstances we may never fully understand. The crew members, too, deserve our contemplation as we drift towards sleep. Albert Richardson, the German-born first mate, had sailed these waters many times before. Andrew Gilling from Denmark had worked with Captain Briggs on previous voyages and trusted his captain's judgment. The Lorenzen brothers, Arian Martens and Gottlieb Gautschall, had all chosen to make their living on the sea, accepting its risks in exchange for steady wages and the adventure of international travel. Each of these men had families, friends, and dreams of their own. They had survived countless storms and challenges during their maritime careers, only to meet their fate in circumstances so mysterious that we still debate what happened to them. Their courage in facing whatever crisis prompted the abandonment of the Mary Celeste stands as a testament to the bravery of those who make their living. From the sea, the physical evidence left behind aboard the Mary Celeste tells its own story of lives interrupted in the midst of their daily routines. Sarah Briggs's sewing, left with needles still attached to the fabric, speaks of domestic tranquility disrupted by sudden emergency. Captain Briggs's carefully maintained logbooks reflect the methodical mind of a professional mariner right up to his final entry. The crew's personal belongings, left neatly arranged in their quarters, suggest men who expected to return to their ship once the immediate danger had passed. Modern science has brought new insights to the Mary Celeste mystery, but it has also highlighted the limitations of evidence-based investigation when dealing with events that occurred so long ago under circumstances that left no witnesses. Computer models can tell us how the ship might have drifted. Chemical analysis can evaluate the potential dangers of her cargo. And meteorological records can reveal the weather conditions she might have encountered. Yet none of these tools can definitively tell us what thoughts passed through Captain Briggs' mind as he made the decision that would doom his ship to become history's most famous maritime mystery. The Numerous theories proposed to explain the Mary Celeste's abandonment reflect the human need to impose rational explanation on inexplicable events. Whether involving alcohol vapors, sea quakes, waterspouts, or other natural phenomena, each theory attempts to find logical causation for what appears to be an irrational decision. Yet the persistence of the mystery, despite centuries of investigation, suggests that some human experiences may transcend our ability to reconstruct them through evidence and analysis. In this uncertainty lies perhaps the most profound lesson of the Mary Celeste mystery. Life presents us all with moments when we must make decisions based on incomplete information, when we must act on instinct and judgment rather than certain knowledge. Captain Briggs faced such a moment on November 25, 1872, when he made his final log entry and set in motion the events that would claim his ship for legend. The sea has always been humanity's greatest mystery, a vast expanse that connects all continents while remaining largely unknown despite centuries of exploration. The Mary Celeste reminds us that the ocean continues to hold secrets, that despite all our modern technology and scientific understanding, the sea remains a place where the extraordinary can occur without warning or explanation. As you settle more deeply into sleep, let your mind drift across the calm waters where the Mary Celeste was found on that December morning in 1872. Imagine the silence that greeted Captain Morehouse and his men as they boarded the abandoned vessel, the profound quiet of a ship without human voices to give her life and purpose. Feel the gentle motion of the waves that had carried her for 9 days without guidance, rocking her empty cabins while her cargo waited patiently in the hold below. The Mary Celeste's story has become part of the eternal conversation between humanity and the sea, a dialogue carried on by every generation of sailors who venture onto waters that remain fundamentally unchanged since the first humans built boats to carry them beyond the horizon. Her mystery connects us to all those who have faced the ocean's challenges and tried to understand its moods and messages. In the gentle darkness that surrounds you now, as the mystery of the Mary Celeste carries you toward peaceful sleep, remember that some stories are more valuable for the questions they ask than for the answers they provide. The ghost ship continues her eternal voyage through human imagination, her empty decks and silent cabins serving as reminders of our own mortality and the mysteries that surround our brief passage through life. The Mary Celeste teaches us that mystery itself has value, that wonder and speculation can be as important as certainty and proof. In a world that often seems determined to explain everything, to reduce all human experience to data points and logical conclusions, she stands as a monument to the enduring power of the unexplained. Let the rhythm of waves against her hull carry you into dreams where questions matter more than answers, where the journey is more important than the destination. In sleep, as in the mystery of the Mary Celeste, we surrender control and trust in forces beyond our complete understanding. The ghost ship waits patiently in the harbor of legend, her story complete, yet always beginning again with each new person who discovers her tale. Rest now in the knowledge that some mysteries are meant to endure, that the Mary Celeste's empty decks and silent rigging continue to inspire wonder more than a century after her final voyage ended in destruction on a Caribbean reef. Her physical form may have returned to the sea that created her mystery, but her legend sails on through the collective memory of humanity, carrying her secrets safely beyond the reach of those who would solve them completely. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow's dawn will bring new questions and new possibilities for understanding, just as it has brought new investigations into the Mary Celeste mystery for more than 150 years.